Hi everyone, Perez here of Branding for the People, and I want to welcome you to my next interview as part of this whole interview series that I'm doing with other successful entrepreneurs, small businesses, VIP clients that I might have worked with, and really the whole intention and the objective of these kinds of interviews was to really shed some additional light in terms of what is this thing called branding and really have a conversation about it because I get it. Sometimes branding can be a scary topic. It can be something that it's confusing or you may not be able to wrap your brain around it. And so one of the things I wanted to do is really demystify a lot of things about branding, have a healthy conversation about it because it does have an impact on your business and you could say your life. So with that being said, I wanted to bring on my next interviewee. His name is Rob Scott. I'm going to actually give the more formal introduction. I'll probably say a few words about Rob. Let me just do this check. Rob, are you there?
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Hey, doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So let me just properly introduce Mr. Rob Scott, and then I'll say a few words about him. So Rob is a master level coach who creates digital products and training programs for entrepreneurs and other world changers, that help them break through their deepest limits and become incredibly effective, wealthy, and deeply fulfilled. So he's known for hijacking people's minds, rewiring their limiting beliefs, and leaving them completely transformed. So for someone who obviously has done a lot of personal transformation work and development work, I'm a big advocate of the subject matter and also the profession in which Rob operates in. So I wanted to share him with you guys, and we're just going to have a conversation about branding and go from there. So that being said, before I have Rob speak, Rob and I met earlier this year. We immediately connected, and I was like, well, I'm pretty selective with who I like to align sort of my time with and who I invite on this series. And so Rob definitely made the short list, as you see here. And, he's a good guy, overall good human being. And so it's an honor to have him. So, Rob, I know you're super busy, so welcome.
Thank you, man. Yeah, thank you for that. It was funny when we met. One of the things that was great, I immediately liked you, but at the same time, your presentation on branding was really impressive. And it was one of the things at that conference that really stood out for me. And so I knew I wanted to talk to you about that. And then as I got to know you, like you mentioned, just right away, I sort of, really fell in love with you. I thought you were awesome. So I'm glad to be on the short list and to be included in this. And I hope we can make this talk really valuable for people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll ask you some questions. You'll ask me some questions. But, obviously we want to listen to a lot of people listening on these interviews. They're entrepreneurs, small businesses. Sometimes they're in startup phase, and sometimes they kind of have multiple six figures or seven figures. So there's a range of audiences here. So let's jump right in and create some value for the people.
Sure. It might be good to share that I'm somebody who kind of came up thinking that, direct marketing was the fastest path, and that, branding yourself or worrying about that was, not the smartest thing to do. And I built a lot of my business doing it that way. And one of the reasons maybe that it was so interesting to find you when I did is that more recently I've just really come to understand more and more and more the power of a brand, right? The power of having that kind of recognition, clarity about what you do, beautifully designing that, having that be, almost like a meme that can get out there and spread, just totally taking things to another level. And so I'm kind of a convert over into, the importance of brand. And if people were to go back and look at some of the things I've written about, I've written about like, hey, don't worry about that yet, do this other stuff first. And, while that can work, I think that if you can find your brand, like when I work with clients and I help them find not even the design part of it or any of that, but just the clarity of what their purpose is in some sense, and it's kind of what they stand for and all that stuff. It becomes one of the most valuable things you can do because it pulls them into their purpose and what they're about, and it becomes really easy to talk about what they do to other people and spread that message and kind of have it go out there. But yeah, I feel like brands are almost the new, not to be weird about it, but the new religion. They're the thing that we kind of believe in a sense. And and they operate on a level of the brain that's a little deeper than people even realize.
Well, it's definitely music to my ears to hear that. I mean, you're not alone in that people, I've worked with a lot of great marketers who have built successful businesses without at least the kind of branding that I'm teaching and proselytizing and consulting around, but they have built successful businesses through direct marketing and great marketing for that matter. And you're one of them. And so part of the idea is yes, and yes, you can build a thriving, successful business with great marketing. The point, sort of why we exist, one of the reasons why we exist as a company is because there's this whole other layer of possibility that great marketing rooted in a great brand can take you further and faster, or can take you in a whole nother direction that you might not have seen for yourself.
Yeah, totally.
So I think part of the challenge, though, and I definitely want to answer your question, obviously I have a definition of the word brand and branding, but for a lot of people like you and a lot of people who focus on direct marketing, I think the problem is why branding kind of gets pushed under the carpet or gets ignored is because they don't have a grasp on the definition of brand. Like, what are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, and there's no right or wrong answer, but if you were to define what is a brand, how would you define it?
Yeah, so I'm just writing down things I want to ask you before we go and sort of talk about as ideas come up.
Yeah.
I wanted to jot something down. To answer what I think a brand is, I go back to, okay, the first thing is the literal brand that used to go on the cow or still may go on the cow to sort of identify ownership or say this is what something is. To me, I heard another great example that it's the emotional aftertaste, right, that you are left with after let's say a buying experience or an experience with a company or something, right? So it's sort of that feeling that comes along with it, right? So I think there's a lot of components of what a brand is, and you've got to own that stuff. What I'm starting to think is that it's the representation of the thing that a consumer is going to decide, am I a yes or a no for that thing around, right? It's that kind of unified, agreeable representation of what something either stands for or does, etc., and how that's portrayed. And so even if you're a direct marketer and you're doing business and you haven't worked on your brand, you still have a brand, right? It might be messy and not concise and designed horribly or no design.
Right.
Leaving this emotional aftertaste with people as you do work with them. You're still, if people are going to refer you or talk about you, they have to do their best to do it. And I think when you can get a good brand, you're putting together a package really intentionally and clearly so that and that they can know kind of what you are and what you represent and what happens. And then as that's shared, hopefully that represents accurately that emotional aftertaste that's going to come with the experience.
That's good. I quite like that definition. I mean, because it is sort of it's emotion for sure. And, this aftertaste, that's an interesting sort of way to language it.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, how long does a first impression last? Forever, right?
Instant. Yeah. Well, the memory of it does. Yeah. How long does it take to do it is instantaneous, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, part of creating that initial impression will leave a taste in people's mouths, figuratively, right? It'll leave an impression upon someone. And I love what you said, that you added this layer to the definition, which is kind of like helping people to decide yes or no. And a good brand is either, people do say that good brands are polarizing. It's either you love them or you hate them. And, but the whole point of creating great branding is to help people make decisions whether or not you're the right resource, the right company, the right service, the right product, whatever it is, but that you're a fit for them or not.
I think that polarizing, just to geek out a little bit on that, it's really interesting. When I started out, when I left the corporate world and started to do more coaching stuff, I started with a podcast where I was sharing these opinions, and I was really trying to be like non-dual. I wasn't trying to stand for anything. I was trying to honor all sides of something. And I was talking about, deeper philosophical, like kind of advanced coaching things, like how's our mind work, what is conscious evolution, these kind of weird topics. And I had lots of people that liked what I did. I had thousands of followers pretty quick to take off virally. But what I noticed was that people that really have powerful stances on something, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, right? These types of people that Steve Jobs and Apple, those kinds of things are very clearly about something, right? And they're not trying to honor all sides. They're trying to say, this is right? This is what I believe. This is what I'm standing for. And I was trying to be the anti-belief guy. I was trying to just kind of like look at everything from as many perspectives as I could, which is a great exercise, but I don't think it polarizes, and it's not really clear what you are then, if you're trying to kind of honor all perspectives and be all things. And I think a lot of beginning entrepreneurs end up in that space where they're not confident enough about defining what they are and what they are not to create a brand that actually cuts away what they're not, because many of us, as we're coming up, want to still have that option to do many things or maybe morph into this other thing over here, and that really dilutes the brand. It dilutes what you are. And so whether it's polarizing to the point where people hate you, I don't know that it needs to be that, but it needs to be really clear what you are and what you're not, right? So that like I know what it is, right? I'm clear on what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it is a big part of that. Now, I would say perhaps that a big reason why people are whether you're just starting out or I don't know, you could be a bit more advanced, but sometimes as an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you obviously have to put a roof over your head and you have to fund your business and feed yourself. Sometimes that confidence in being able to let me just rephrase that, but turning away people sometimes can be scary, or that comes from a place of fear that, oh, well, if I'm turning this down, that's going to hurt my revenue. But a reframe of all of that is looking at, well, turning down people is actually going to create space for the people that you're meant to work with.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Your ideal target audiences. But what comes from that is really having that confidence of knowing who you are and who you're not, to be able to confidently turn down business and willingly accept the business that you should be working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that mirrors, direct marketing in a sense of like knowing your niche and knowing what you do and what you don't. And I still struggle with that. I still struggle with having really precision clarity on, what I do at the highest level, because I work with so many different industries and different people and, different struggles, right? And I don't think that serves me. And it certainly doesn't serve my brand, and it doesn't serve getting the word out about what I do really clearly. Right, and so I struggle with branding myself because I'm still trying to be too many things to too many people in a certain way, and it's really scary when I meet someone like you and I want to work with you and I'm thinking about it, and then I go, but how do we get the one message? Like, how do we get it down to that? And that art form, someone like you that has that skill, is so impressive because it's to get aligned with that to where the business owner loves it, and it's attractive to other people, and it's incredibly clear, and it does kind of cut away what it's not supposed to be. That exercise is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And what's funny is, like a lot of things, I do this really not to the level that you do with branding all the way through, but like I help people get clear about their purpose and their business and that kind of stuff, right? And every time we do it, it's an incredibly valuable exercise, right? Just that exercise alone. And then if you're to put design and branding and all that stuff on top of that,
it just adds to it, right? Just
wildly powerful. I mean, it changes the whole game. It changes the way they show up, how excited they are, all that. It changes the results. And then you have, from any marketing standpoint, you have a much more clear message about what you do, and then that's shareable, and then you can grow and all that. And why we resist that, myself included, I know, it doesn't matter why to explain it here, but I'm sad that that's the case, that there's this natural kind of resistance to cutting away and getting to the essence of it.
But it's good that you're bringing it up. Sorry to interject, but it is great that you're bringing it up, because you're not alone in that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs in small business, now keep in mind, Fortune 500 companies, and I've worked with some of the, the big firms, right? But Fortune 500 companies have been able to have access to this level of strategic branding and thinking. Entrepreneurs, not so much. At least when I started entering into the marketplace, they may have gotten sort of a taste of branding, or they might have a tainted view of it. But it's okay that you're bringing this up because that mindset is very similar to perhaps a lot of entrepreneurs about branding. So anyway, sorry to cut you off. So it's just kind of
No. I think I was pretty much done. I just wanted to kind of express that challenge, and I think all of that stemmed from you saying it's polarizing, right? A good brand is polarizing, and to me that was sort of about finding the essence and cutting away, what you're not, to really shine a light and appropriately package what you are. Right, which is maybe even a simpler way to talk about a brand. It's like this beautiful clarity and packaging of what you are, right?
Or who you are. What you are and who you are, sure.
Exactly.
I know it's interesting because your work is, obviously the work that you do is transformative, right?
Mm-hmm.
It transforms people's lives when they get a sense of that clarity in their purpose, right? Even if you, like you said, it's like that alone sometimes is just worth a valuable exercise to go through. Is just having a purpose or having your understanding your why or your purpose. Branding is very similar. As self-serving as it is for me to say, but it's very similar in that, yes, we do branding. You could say that we're also in the business of transformation. Now, I know people aren't waking up in the middle of the night trying to figure out how can I be transformed, but if you get to the heart of what we do, it's really taking you from this state that is not optimal, not ideal, maybe confusing, or maybe not your highest level of how to present yourself visually and verbally, to a whole new state where there's confidence, there's clarity, there's cohesion, there's consistency, there's that it factor, if you will, that when you walk into any room or you present to any prospect or whatnot, that people know exactly who you are and who you're not.
Yeah.
And there's an attractiveness to that, right?
Yeah, and you're saying, I think it is absolutely transformation. It's certainly a form of transformation, like no doubt. And I will tell you that probably in recent years, I've done a lot of work on myself. I used to be disastrously, dysfunctional in all these different kinds of ways. And so I operate on such a higher level of not only consciousness, but success and, money and all that stuff than I ever have before. And yet my most recent struggle was probably around my own business purpose and my brand and sort of how I wanted to represent myself, because that's constantly evolving. And what's funny, as I do have products and programs and all these things going on, but a lot of what I do is still at the freelance level or the consulting level or the coaching level. And I can shift that to different focuses whenever I want, which is, maybe calls to a freedom kind of need in me, right? I'm allowed to do whatever's interesting in the moment or whatever. And so, I wonder if there's a fear of branding in some sense, because it's a fear of like limiting myself in some way, right? Or, I talk to people and I consider myself in this thing where I'm blessed to have skills in lots of areas very deeply, right?
Yeah.
But that leads to, not having the time or energy to really kind of call one out and go as deep as I could possibly go in one thing. So, not to beat this up, and we've already spent a lot of time on this, but I do think there's a resistance to, for entrepreneurs and newer entrepreneurs especially, myself years ago, calling it one thing when it's going to feel like it's going to limit them, or like, what about those people, Yeah.
Well, let's do this just in the interest of helping to lower the resistance, because I'd love to give access to this line of thinking and this discipline, if you will, to as many entrepreneurs and small businesses as possible, because if it can help them to make a huge difference in their business, but also their impact, and even if you have a brick and mortar business, right? I mean, there is just a whole other layer of branding that can help you. Now, you might hear that and you say, yeah, I get it on an intellectual level or on a conceptual level, but let's dive right into, like, maybe it's appropriate to maybe ask me some questions, right? Because the same kind of questions that you're bringing up I promise you, are the same kind of questions that might be in the back of the minds that people are listening to.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Right? That's and I'm sharing what I've experienced, but also that I've heard, clients experience as well. I don't know why, but I have a question, and there's nothing where I'm trying to like tear down brand, but I'm thinking about like going into one restaurant that's dingy and its signage isn't clear and it's whatever. The food might be delicious, but you talked about brick and mortar, and immediately I thought of like New York restaurants and things like that. I was in New York last weekend, and I went into this one restaurant. It was like tapas, and it was amazing and delicious, and just this fantastic kind of layout. And that
I must have missed that phone call.
That experience. Well, I thought you were in Costa Rica or whatever, so you were traveling the globe, right? But yeah, so that experience, like that brand in that way, that design, that beauty, that kind of clarity and focus, right? In the way it was all laid out, carried the wait staff differently. It made the whole experience different, and the food was amazing. But if you stack that branding experience on top of it, it made it all so much more valuable to me, the consumer, right?
Sure.
And so, I'm sitting here with like documents that I share with clients and do things like that. And some of those, depending on where I was in my business, they're different fonts, right? They're the name is different. And I have products, so like each one of my products gets a little bit of branding around what it is, right, in its own right. But none of that is cohesive across the whole thing. And so, how do you go about getting that clarity? What's the process to begin helping somebody get that clarity? And then secondarily, I have another question just about branding people, right? Because I had to go through a big kind of question of like, do I make my website robscott.com or do I make it fundamentalshift.com, my business name, or what's the best there? So you said to ask you a couple questions. Those are two questions that come to mind. And probably the first one's more interesting. It's like, how do you get to that clarity?
Well, the first thing you do is you hire someone, right?
Yeah.
No, but that being said, there's let me just give a framework, because part of this process, there's an art and a science to branding, right? But part of getting closer to that clarity is, I get interviewed as well a lot of times, so it's actually perfect that I'm sharing this, but it's getting clear on your who, what, and why. Let's just start there, right? So the first part is getting clear on your who, what, and why, which is, who are your target audiences? What's the problem that you're solving for them? And why should they listen to you? Why should they care about you? Now obviously I'm talking about service-based businesses, but this does apply to consumer products, technology, etc., right? But the first thing is kind of understanding the who, what, and why. And listen, if you're not in business to serve people, then I don't know what kind of business you have, because every business and brand, it exists to serve an audience and ultimately to solve their problems. And there's different layers of problems. So if you don't like the word problem, what their challenge is, or what is it that they want, or what is it that they need, right? And then the why part is interesting, because it really gets into what differentiates you, what is unique about your program, product, or service that is different in solving that problem than other people that might say that they can solve that same problem.
Yeah, so is that a unique thing? Because, you go with like a Simon Sinek why or something, and that's looking for like me, the entrepreneur, what's my purpose, right? Which I think a lot of people who talk about branding want to nail that as well. But what's really interesting is you're saying that it's why do they care about me? Like what differentiates me that they need to know about, right? So it's almost like a why for them, right?
It's exactly it. Well, it's a why, but it's a different use of the why. Like Simon Sinek obviously talks about the start with why. Not for this to sound like it's a direct competition with that line of thinking, but from a branding perspective, I say start with who, because branding is an outside-in perspective, and you always have to know who you're talking to, because your branding and therefore your marketing should be geared towards your ideal target audiences. Case in point, it's like, well, if you're trying to appeal to a high-end luxury sort of sophisticated market, it doesn't work to have a perception or a brand that looks cheesy and mom and pop.
Yeah.
On the inverse, if you're trying to appeal to a younger demographic, or if you're trying to appeal to an urban environment, or to teenagers or kids, it's a different market segment. It doesn't work to have something that is a luxury premium, Louis Vuitton, like a high-end luxury brand. It doesn't really work to appeal to that market.
Can I ask you a deeper question about that?
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, I apologize, but so do you have frameworks about the who? Because I think that's really interesting, is starting with who, and it's one of the biggest things I've resisted. It's one of the biggest things most of my clients resist, because I think that there's this desire that what I do is for everyone, right? Of course, right? And we'd love that to be the case. We'd love it that if everyone does it. And, quite frankly, even toilets aren't for everyone, right? There's places on this earth where there's holes and not toilets, right? So these
not
things
in
that we think
not in my apartment, though.
Right, yeah. Yeah, thankfully. But, what I'm saying is that obviously, right, discerning who this is for is there. But then when I think about some of the things that I do, right, entrepreneurs is an obvious thing. I service entrepreneurs. But there's different, like, layers of the who. There's thinking about it by, obviously, gender, age, income,
those are
location,
right? The demographics.
Yeah, but is that so? That's part of it. And then, like, what other ways do you consider who? Because is it somebody that only has a certain problem? Is it at what way do you get down into that? Because every time I'm exploring that with people, there seems to be an infinite way to look at that, and what we land on is never really systematic for me. It's never like, okay, it is a demographic and it is an income level and it is a whatever, gender, etc. Sometimes it's just, people that have bad ankles or whatever, right? Which is a very different thing. And is that enough to be a who? People with bad ankles? Because to me, that's, that might be a 90-year-old woman, or it could be a 14-year-old kid, or, it's not really a who to me. So how do you discern your who? And what granularity do you need for that?
Well, there's so many different layers. It's a complex question, but you started off with, are there frameworks, right? Yeah. So there's a few different things. One of the things that you pointed out, which I'll highlight, which is understanding the demographics, and the complement to that is also understanding the psychographics. So this is kind of common in sort of basic business and marketing, is understanding the demographics and the psychographics. So how old are they, and where do they live, and what kind of car do they drive, but also, what do they read? Where do they hang out? What are their dreams and wishes and hopes and desires? And what are their values? What do they place an importance on? How do they spend their time? How do they spend their money? So there's a whole layer of demographics and psychographics. That is a framework. Another framework is also kind of looking at, I call it this, imagine sort of like, it looks like a bell curve, right? But imagine this sort of line here, and you slice it in two parts. There's the 20%, the 60%, and the 20%. Now, along the axis, and I know I have a chart for this, but I'm going to do my best to kind of explain it since you brought up the question, right?
Yeah.
But all you need to really understand is that there's 20% of the population that you're targeting that are going to be complete naysayers. They will always say something negative about you. They're never happy. Maybe they're not. I don't know if I can't say that they're never happy.
Yeah.
But they're never happy with you. Or
yeah.
they always have something to complain about. And we'll call those the naysayers. Then on the other side, the other 20% of that bell curve are people who are your raging fans. Right?
Yeah.
You're loyalists. And again, this isn't just for service-based entrepreneurs. I mean, there are people who are loyal, raging fans of Apple, of Xbox versus PlayStation, whatnot,
Yeah.
New York versus LA, right? I mean, there's people who are raging fans. And then there's the 60%, which are, we'll call them followers, right? And these are people that they can swing either way, but with the right leadership and the right trailblazers, if you will, they're easily led into that direction. So I give that as a very high-level strategic framework, in that I say focus on the 80%. And more specifically, focus a lot of your time on the 20%, because it's more exciting and more powerful to have people who are raging fans than it is to have people that are just followers of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Raging fans will talk about you. They're loyal. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I talk about it in the way that I'll call it a raving fan. Right? A raving fan is somebody that even if they can get the music for free, right, they buy the band's album. Right? Even if they can go download it somewhere because they're a fan and they want to contribute back because they have love. Right? It's like they really dig it. Yeah. So. They want to invest in you. They'll participate in anything, even if they didn't love the sales process. They're like, I'm going to everything he does, right? Because they're a true fan, right? So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and then there's one other framework, which it might be a bit more of a complex, and I'll bring it up. But basically it's kind of looking at what's the population. Let's say you're solving a problem. What's the population of the people who are needing that problem solved, right? And then look at what's a cut of that. What's like a slice of the pie? What's a cut of that number of population? Say 1 million, right? What percentage do you want to penetrate? And then you kind of look at that, and then you look at, okay, well, how much do these people spend on certain kinds of services to solve their problems? And now you're kind of looking at what they're looking to spend, and you know what I'm saying? And then you want to see if you have a viable business opportunity to be able to create something, market it, sell it, and deliver. Right? As opposed to just a concept that you don't know if it's going to work or not. So anyway, it's a little bit more complex, but it's kind of really starting with the market that you're trying to...
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that, because without that clarity, and I wouldn't say I have that clarity in my business at all. And, you know, I'm lucky to get enough referrals. And, but that sounds like a really mature, you know, business step for people to take. And I think of other people in and around my life that, you know, have other coaching businesses and do these things, and they're like throwing spaghetti at the wall all the time. And it's like, well, I got to blog every week because, you know, my tribe has to hear. But that tribe is mostly followers who really aren't buying anything, who are just sort of, you know, maybe eating up the free information, or maybe the email's just going in the other thing, right? They don't really have a very specific, clear, this is how much they invest, this is the, you know, what I'm planning to have an effect on and do. It's really powerful. It's really, really powerful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that... I mean, I was just kind of going back to your questions, right, and just kind of...
Yeah, I wanted to ask, the other question was about branding, you know, people instead of businesses, and making that choice, right? And so, you know, a simple thing that I've heard and said to consider at least is, you know, do you one day plan on selling the business or being able to sell the business or whatever? And if you've branded it, you know, if I brand myself as Rob Scott, you know, and take that brand further, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that. A lot of people say, you know, don't do that. And then I think there's also an argument where whatever your name is and whoever you are, you certainly have a personal brand, whether you make an effort to promote it or not. And so then there's people like me that go out and, you know, to a great degree, I am my business. And so what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on branding somebody around name and who they are and all that stuff?
Again, another complex question which requires some complex thinking. But that being said, I'll try to simplify it, because here's the short answer. The short answer depends, but let me tell you why it depends. Certainly that's one factor, right? Like, are you going to sell the business down the road? And you obviously can't sell your name, right? But, you know, obviously it would be useful to kind of look at how many people actually do sell of entrepreneurs, how many people actually go down that path in selling their business. You know, I'll use me as an example just because, you know, I'm in the same boat as everyone else trying to make these sort of tough decisions, right? Like, I have a company called Branding for the People, and that was intentional, right? And then there's me. And so most people, whenever I speak on stages or I'm networking, most people will remember my name, or they'll look up my name. At the same time, the branding piece of the company has also, the name of itself really resonates with a lot of people, or at least the ideal people who want to, you know, follow our work.
Yeah.
It's descriptive in nature. People get it. They do branding, and we do branding, and we work with people, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of works to have both of those to coexist. But why I'm bringing that up is because there's no right or wrong answer, and that I think there's a few things you want to think about. Is what is the long-term vision of your business? Number one. Yes, do you want to sell it? Do you want to have different verticals on it? How much of a presence do you want to have as a personality brand to drive that brand forward? If you want to be front and center, like collectively you, if you want to be front and center, then maybe there's some ways for you to brand more towards your name. Yeah. I think the other thing so that's the kind of the long-term thing, and I think the other thing to think about is what converts better. Now, obviously, you know, we can parlay that into direct marketing, but if there's so much equity, if you're going to spend a lot of time and equity building a brand and a concept behind your name, then do that and see how that converts. But if it makes sense to create a company that is called something else that people can kind of get behind, and they just happen to know that you're the person behind it, then build equity in that company brand. Right? Yeah. So I'm kind of looking at it, just to be tactical, is just kind of looking at, well, what's going to make it easier for your customers to buy from you?
Yeah.
There's probably a lot more that I can go to it, but it's an important question. I know it's not a cop-out, and then I'm saying it doesn't.
No, I'm really glad. I'm actually really glad that you're going with it. It's complex. I mean, it is complex, right? It's one of those things where, Oprah Winfrey, right? Like there's tons of examples of people that, that brand around their name and they're wildly successful, right? Like tons and tons and tons of them. And yet, I don't know if Tony Robbins can sell his, he probably could, right? If he's on tape and enough of his products and all that, he could retire and Tony Robbins, business could continue on.
Exactly.
And
because there is equity around that name, right? So
yeah, completely.
He might license the use of that name. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
No. That's exactly what I was saying. So so it's interesting, and but somebody like you who does have a name that matters, right? And then people get to know you, and you're out there. But you've done really good at branding a company name as well, and I just wanted to hear you talk about that. And it's good to hear that it really depends. I mean, it's one of those things that
it depends. Yeah. And do I come across some challenges with it too? I mean, I think where I come across challenges in that from an execution perspective is there's, the company has to manage a branding for the people Facebook page, and then a Perez sort of page, if you will. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like what's really working.
But what that affords you is, and not that this isn't solvable in lots of ways, but you could hire other branding things and continue to go be the face of the company and have other people kind of doing the work in the back if you wanted to, more of the work. And I know you already do that to some degree, but that could grow exponentially under branding for the people.
That's right.
And you could have other lives and start other companies and do those things. Whereas if you are your name only, there's a little bit of expectation that you're going to be showing up to do the branding, yourself every time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's it. I mean, it's some good nuggets to maybe think about, at least for the range of entrepreneurs that are listening in on this, is just some questions to ask.
Yeah.
Where are you going? Where are you taking the business? What's going to help with conversions? And, is this a big enough umbrella? Or how much time and energy do you want to put into building equity behind one versus the other? And then how much do you want to be involved in being the face of the brand or not?
Yeah. Can I ask, I don't know how much time we have, but can I ask one more question that is maybe annoying? Right. I'm not sure if this will be annoying or not. I don't know if you even have answers to this, but it's as I told you, I'm kind of a convert, and I'm now so convinced of the value of branding, especially branding well, that I'm curious if the people that you've worked with, not that there's a clear number necessarily, but the people that you've taken from pre-brand, right, to really a good, all the way executed brand, do you have reports back from them in any way on how much that changed their business or what that's done? Or, I know you have testimonials, of course, and all that stuff, but have you looked at what kind of game changer that is?
Absolutely. I definitely have tons of testimonials and reports back, but there's one thing I really want to set up first before I answer that question. And here's the thing. Branding is a lifestyle choice. So if you want a logo, you can get a logo today. You can go online to 99 Designs or CrowdSpring or whatever resource you choose to use. You can get a logo this afternoon if you wanted to, right? When you go down the path of creating a brand, it's a lifestyle. It's born, and then it evolves over time. So in essence, why I'm bringing that up is there is no, yes, there's a pre-brand, but you mentioned all the way to an executed brand. Well, the truth of the matter is we're creating the kernel or the seed that takes a life on its own, and it's always developing. Now, there's some things that I will, that we'll take credit for because we were at the source of it. And there's some things where, someone with great marketing and great sales skills that will obviously help in converting a prospect to a client. Someone who's really masterful in marketing, online marketing, will probably know how to take the branding work and have it convert with, online marketing, right? So there's a whole range of things. But the point is that it's coming from this source, and we're glad to take people in defining that, because we know that it will produce immediate results and results that we might not even intend for it to happen. Now, some specific examples, just to not be so conceptual about it, is, I've had a client that her close rate, her conversion rate went from 33% to 99%. Now, that happened within a year of, during the process of a year. Now, maybe that's evolved over time, or maybe the next problem was, charging a higher rate. So maybe her rates will increase from X percent to another percent, but that might happen in year 2 or year 3. I have a client who achieved Inc. 500 status 2 years in a row, right? Not everyone's going to do that, but she has great marketing, and she moves really, right? So there's that. So increasing conversions, increasing revenue, making it easier for people to buy at a higher price point. So there are some metrics around it, and then there's not. There's just, it starts with people are purely confident in knowing who they are and who they're not, that it just takes a life on its own, and the ROI, if you will, is priceless.
Yeah. And I love that idea that you're actually, it almost sounds like you're kind of breathing life into something, right? You're creating a brand that then takes on participation from tribe and audience, and they have like an experience with it as well, and there's a life that is kind of born, that gives, if anybody really cares about what they do and really cares about their business in some way, to me that's really exciting, to almost like give it the gift of doing the work to create that, so that they can really build something that's going to grow in that way. Whereas I see the alternative as almost like you're grinding and you're working, but you've never given it that magic dust to really make it something that can kind of grow on its own, And it's like I talk about, we don't make things grow, right? Like I can put a seed in the ground and hopefully the soil's good, and I can bring maybe sunlight, arrange that it's going to get light and water, and then I've created the environment for growth. But like I don't do the growth, right?
That's right.
The growth kind of happens because there's the potential for growth there. And it sounds to me like when you create a brand, you're creating that environment for something that can all of a sudden take root and grow, right?
That's right. Yeah, you hit it on the nail. Oh, well, good. Well, you and I can talk about this all day long for sure. And I'm actually glad that you asked me some questions, and we had a healthy conversation about it. And, listen, if someone wanted to learn more about Rob Scott, and they want to learn more about what you're doing in your line of work, where should we send them to?
Yeah, so I've got some stuff at robscott.com. I've got free courses and lots of free video tutorials and all that stuff, and you can find out more about what I do over there. People that would be interested in doing that are people that are maybe starting to notice that they're living with some limiting beliefs, dealing with self-sabotage, and feeling stuck about what to do. I've got some very, very fast processes that can break them through that and actually do what I call identity shifting, actually shift them into a new level of themselves and in their identity. Entrepreneurs have great results with this, and it leads to more profit and more fulfillment and more happiness. Yeah,
gotta love that. More profit, more fulfillment, and more happiness. Can't go wrong with that. So go check out robscott.com. Hopefully this interview today has been of great value for you wherever you are in your business and building your brand. But it was good to kind of get some of these questions brought out from people in the trenches just like you and me. So with that being said, thank you, Rob, for your time. And thank you, everyone else. And we'll see you on the next interview. Have a great day.
All right. See you later, man.